They got loose from some facility. They were running around in South America, and his team was deployed there to kill these things because they were killing villages full of people. They have some kind of armor on them, on their chest. One of the things he said I'll never forget is the way these things scream when you kill them. He said, till the day I die, I'll never forget that, the sound that they make. Like when something like that happens, Josh, you think you're prepared for it, but you're just not. He shoots, I guess, above its head, and it doesn't even duck. It just stands there. It knocked his consciousness out of his body, like he saw himself above his body. Just a bright white flash, like it lit up the whole place and then just went dark again. I mean, what the hell? It just slowly starts leaning out, and I see this whole head and shoulder thing peeping out from the tree at me. He told me, he said, well, they're going to kill me eventually. They've killed all the people that are, that were in the group I'm in. There's only 2 of us left. They've all died in really strange, mysterious ways. He said, but with me, it'll probably either be a stroke or a heart attack. My name is Sybilla Irwin. It's so hard for me to talk about myself. I'm used to being on the other end of this. I'm an artist. I'm a researcher. I'm a person who was born with a curious mind. So from the time I was just a little kid, on, it was, how some children start with why, everything is why. Well, I just never stopped, and I still have that. I still have that curiosity about life, and I actually consider that one of my strongest characteristics is that I don't take no for an answer. I still want to know why. And if someone asks me, after all the witnesses I've worked with and all the research I've done personally, like questions like, what are these things? The longer that I do this, the longer I'm involved, the more people I talk with, the less I feel like I know. Like the less that I can definitively say, well, Sasquatch is this. Our Dogman are natural, or they're created, because I've heard it both ways. I've heard, I ran into an incredible man back in the late 90s, and we became fast friends, and he worked in secret programs for the Department of Defense, and had been in the remote viewing program like a long, long time ago, back when it first started in California, and knew all the big players. So he started telling me things, Josh, that at the time, no one had ever said those things to me. So I was kind of like, this person's either like really certifiable or he's telling the truth. And the longer I got to know him, the more I kind of discovered he was telling the truth. And then, and he told me, he said, well, they're going to kill me eventually. They've killed all the people that are, that were in the group I'm in. There's only 2 of us left, and they've all died in really strange, mysterious ways. He said, but with me, it'll probably either be a stroke or a heart attack. He said, because they have a weapon that they could just point at your heart and off you. And, if you're hearing this back in the late 90s, you're thinking, what? Like, how can that be? And of course, now I've read some things that the CIA has openly talked about, that they have weapons like that. So he was telling the truth. Everything that he told me back then has now come to light. Every single thing. And there's more, that apparently will be uncovered. But he was the first one to tell me about this dogman thing. And he didn't call it a dogman. He just called it a biological weapon that our government created. He used to say over and over again, Sybilla, you have no idea what your government is involved in. And if you did, you just wouldn't be able to sleep at night. And, it's interesting how that's all becoming more and more apparent to us, what our government is involved in. Anyway, he described these creatures, 20 years ago to me. It's crazy. Now, when I look back at the description, is exactly the description that like Matt gave, Matt Emch, my beautiful person you interviewed recently. And if you're watching this, Matt, thank you for the beautiful things that you said. I love you too. So he described,
spoke very, very highly of you, by the way.
Well, yeah. And he speaks very highly of you too, by the way. You've absolutely supported him emotionally and intellectually and in all ways, and I deeply appreciate you for that. Difficult time, for me as an artist, even. We can talk about that later. Anyway, so my friend, the one that worked for Black Ops programs, told me about this thing, and he said that some of them had gotten loose Like they were running around. They got loose from some facility. They were running around in South America, and his team was deployed there to kill these things because they were killing villages full of people. And he said they have some kind of armor on them, on their chest, and he described them to a T. And he said the only way they could kill them was those lasers, which back then laser weapons weren't even a thing. Like I'd never even heard of that. So it all just sounded so insane. One of the things he said I'll never forget is he said, I'll never forget the way these things scream when you kill them. He said, till the day I die, I'll never forget that, the sound that they make when we were killing these things. God knows. So fast forward all this time, every dogman witness I've worked with has described them. Some of the head shapes are different. Some of them have kind of the German Shepherd head. Some of them have more of a pit bull kind of like head, but the body is the same as kind of what this man told me about. And he did, I got a call from his wife, 2005, telling me, she said, Sybilla, well, they got him. He's had a stroke and he doesn't even know who I am anymore. Sad.
Wow.
Yeah. Sad. He knew it was coming because I used to ask him, why are you telling me all this? And he said, because you're willing to listen and because they're going to kill me anyway. So might as well, get it out there. I often wonder about this because there's five children in my family. I have 3 brothers and a little sister. My sister and I are the ones who always experience the paranormal stuff, but none of my brothers have. And I don't know if you guys ever talk about that, like how in families, some people are so deeply affected by paranormal events and then some people never experience them. And so their paradigm is so different than mine. They're very scientifically, they're deep, there is a line, there is a scientific side of, to look at life. And that's the right way of being, according to them. And then there's us, my sister and I, who have all these unexplained things that we've experienced. And so we're on the other side of the line. We're kind of in the fairy side. But, once you've experienced something that you cannot explain, it changes you forever. And
100%.
You can't unsee. You can't unsee. And you know that from talking to witnesses. You can't unsee what you've seen and what you've experienced. And you own it. So from that point on, it changes your paradigm. So from a little kid on, I've just had a very different paradigm than, a lot of people. And I've asked myself many times, is that a blessing or a curse?
I think it's a blessing.
I think it is too.
It expands your mind in a way that I think most people have a really hard time even comprehending. And I think because it's so scary, but you almost have like this sense of this awareness, it's there. And I don't know if it necessarily prepares you or makes you more prepared for it, but I feel like it gives you more wisdom.
I think it deepens you. Yeah. I think it deepens you as a person whenever you're willing to look out through your eyes and know that there's so much more to reality than just these 5 senses. And that there's people out here that for some reason or another are like receivers. And, some things, whether they're multidimensional or whatever, seem to seek us out for some reason and reveal themselves to us in strange ways.
You've worked with many eyewitnesses, many of whom are deeply traumatized. They're breaking down, they're crying, they're struggling to convey their emotion in real time. Honestly, I didn't really have that until I had the infamous interview that everybody knows with Matt Emch. And it's funny because, people think that was doctored up or this or that, but when he reached out to me and was like, hey, do you want to interview me? I had met him at a conference, but I didn't even know he had an experience. And so he's like, oh, do you want to do it? And I was like, oh, sure. And so that whole interview, my reaction is 100% genuine. It was seeing him react in real time. I've never seen a person, but he was visibly shaken as he told it.
Absolutely.
And I think that caused me to be like, holy crap, either he's an Oscar-winning actor or this is a deep trauma.
I kind of think, by the way, when it was around the fire and he could kind of see the fire coming through it, and then the way when it retreated, the way it kind of shrunk and turned into a black shadow, I kind of think it was supernatural. Maybe the military saw them as an opportunity to create a bioweapon. Maybe they somehow captured one and then used its genetics to bioengineer their own. Well, I think back in the time when he was talking about them, they were just in South America. And I think the labs where they were created were there. But I think, he passed away in 2005. So, that's 20 years later. Do I think they're releasing those guys in the North America? Absolutely. And for what purpose, though? Like, are they training them here? Because, and I worked with Joe Barger, did some artwork for him, did a sketch for him. It's terrifying. I can send it to you so you can put it up there.
Yeah.
The things he said about when that thing was, when it was running beside and it was checking out everything in his cab, just in his hand.
That
its
gives
hand
me
is there.
chills.
I know, and it's like, and he says you can see it's working it out, like, and then giving you that look of your mind. Kind of thing. Well, and the same thing with Martin Groves, where that was obviously I think that was somebody's asset as well. It's like, who are these people that would do such a thing or protect, all the stuff that goes on in the land between the lakes? So it absolutely makes you wonder. I mean, I totally believe there's just shadow government. So it's this part of the shadow government, but then there's all these biblical things pointing to Armageddon and the release of, vile creatures on the earth. Are they a part of that? And then our government has just used that as I don't know. Like I said, the more I do this, the less answers I have. But my focus has always been on how to help these poor people who have come face to face with these things in like real time reality, and how in the world,
God bless you for that, by the way.
Well, thank you.
Like you're an incredible person for what you do.
That's just, that God gave me some talents. All my life, I've just wanted to make a difference. Even ever since I was a little kid, I just wanted to find a way to make a difference. Who in a million years would have thought it would be helping people who, are seeing these things that aren't supposed to exist? I had no idea. But when I discovered the BFRO website back in, I guess it was 1999, somewhere around in there, I was a special ed teacher. So I was working as a special ed teacher. And one of the things I would do with my kids whenever they were really great is I'd let them, we'd listen to something or we'd watch something. And Whitley Strieber had this 911 recording of this man calling in, I think it was in Washington State. I don't know if you've heard it.
Kitsap County, 1990. The I just did that one actually like a week ago.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that, I swear, like I heard that and you could hear that man's voice, right? That man's voice.
Gosh, it's big. Woo!
get someone out here.
Yeah.
And it killed his dog, and so I played that for the kids, and they were like, "Oh, Miss Irwin," and so we got all into it. Well, that was embedded on the BFRO channel page, and that's how I found the BFRO, was through Whitley Strieber, because I'm a Whitley Strieber's changed my life. That's a whole nother story, and so that's how I found the BFRO. And so I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding me? This is a website." And it's got all these reports from state to state. So I was living in Texas, so I clicked on Texas, and there's all these reports came up. I found myself 2 a.m. I'm a teacher. I got to get up. I found myself at 2 a.m. Voraciously reading reports. I ripped through Texas reports, man. Then I started, Oklahoma, Louisiana, like all Colorado, and then you start seeing these patterns. These people aren't talking to each other. It's all anonymous on the BFRO website anyway. But someone from Florida is reporting the same thing that someone in East Texas reported. They're describing behaviors that obviously these are real creatures. I mean, I didn't doubt. After I saw the Patterson footage, I didn't doubt that was a real creature. From the very beginning, I was like, the blind thinker. I want to know more about that. Anyway, so that's kind of how I got started in the whole cryptid thing. I just wanted to know, and I thought maybe I could figure out what these things are by the descriptions of people, what they saw, what they heard, what happened. What are these things? I still to this day, what are these things? No answers there. But I was just it's like a bottomless pit for me. I will never stop wondering who they are. What they are, but who they are. Like, who are these beings? I'll never stop. I won't ever stop. But then I went on an expedition in 2008. They came to Texas, and I'm like, I'm going. I invited people to go with me. No one would go, so I went by myself. And from the minute my boots hit the ground, Josh, I was hooked. I was like, I mean, I left there a different person. I left there molecules rearranged. This is what I want to do with the rest of my life. This is the research I want to involve myself in. Became an investigator. And then is when I started working with people. And then is when the real meat and potatoes happen. Like when you start, just like you start talking to people, they open up and they start sharing with you. Just the fact that you're listening and you're not making fun of them, or you're not like, oh, rolling your eyes and oh yeah, whatever, or trying to change their mind about what they saw. You're just listening, you're just offering them a place where they can communicate what they saw, how they felt. um, I realized really within 2 or 3 reports, these people absolutely they need an advocate. They need someone who's like just for them. And so, and for me, and it still is to this day, it's all about these witnesses. They need people who, because most of them, their families don't even believe them. They can't even talk to, and sometimes they can't even talk to the people who they had their sighting with. Like the communication completely ends with that friend. Well, that's happened to Matt. That happened. That happened with so many people I worked with, that the person they had a sighting with, like, refuses to ever talk about it again. So, and if their family doesn't believe them, which always I find so shocking and horrifying. But I mean, I've experienced that personally. I have family that don't believe I've experienced what I've experienced. And at first, it's hard not to take that personally, but it's really not personal. It is, it's on them that they're not open-minded enough, either that or it makes them too afraid or whatever to admit that these things could be real, the things other people are seeing, especially the dogman thing.
I think it's a thing where they believe that you believe you saw what you saw.
Yeah. Like a little pat on the head. Oh, that's so sweet. Well, I believe you believe that. Run along.
Don't pity me. Either support me or don't even bother.
The first Sasquatch experience. Now, I've had other experiences, like I said, with the whole paranormal thing. From a little kid on, I was having what I thought they were just vivid dreams, with aliens in them. And I didn't, when you're a child, you just think everyone is, everyone's life is kind of like your life, internally, externally. If you've got parents that drink, you think everyone's got parents that drink, and that's perfectly normal, right? I mean, when you're a kid, at least I did, I just didn't question those things. And I just thought everybody had, dreams of these little people vaporizing through the wall, communicating with you, the telepathic thing, being in a white room on a stretcher with, them doing medical exams on you. When I look back now, I think, how did I not think that was unusual? Because as a child, I never experienced any medical procedures whatsoever. I was a totally healthy kid. I mean, my first stitches, I think I was 10. But I just didn't question any of that. And then, that's weird that I didn't question any of that. But I mean, I never asked anyone. I never went to school as a first grader and say, hey, are y'all dreaming about aliens? Because it just never occurred to me, right? It's kind of weird when you look back, but I just thought that they were really vivid dreams. And that was it until the real kicker came in 1987 when I saw the book Communion. It had just come out, or 86, 87. And you know how in the really big bookstores and the malls, when a new book comes out, they used to have a big display, like right out front, 50 books would be there. And I just happened to be walking by, and I turned and I saw that face, and I knew her. Like, I knew her instantly. It was instant recognition. And I also instantly had to find the nearest bathroom, and I ran in the stall, just started throwing up like violently. And I was not sick before that point. Like the seeing that face was so disturbing to me, and that I knew who she was. Man, I was sick. A lot of people I discovered later, I mean, I've heard throughout the years, a lot of people had a very similar reaction that I did. And a lot of people wrote into the streamers after they saw that. And I I thought about it, but I just it was such a private thing. And I was so terrified that it took me, I finally called MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, and spoke to someone because after I saw that book cover, anytime I would try to remember like how I knew her, I would just get these violent headaches, and which I had never had a problem with before. So that was on, and the only way I could get rid of them was just to go to sleep. And if I'd go to sleep, I'd wake up and it would be gone. So I finally called Mutual UFO Network, and Walt Andrus was the president at the time, and the headquarters was here in Seguin, Texas. And I said, look, this is what's happening, and what do you think? And he said, well, I think, would you be interested in going under, regressive hypnosis? And I said, I would, but I don't know anybody, and I don't want to be led. I really just want to find out what's there. And so, you don't know me, but I'm a really courageous person. You'll learn a little bit more about my escapades later, but I'm kind of fearless about going into the woods by myself or living in a camper in the national forest for 4 months by myself. I mean, I've done those things, but it took me 6 months to get up the courage to go do the regression because I was really kind of terrified of what I was going to uncover. And I have the recording that we did from 1987. I have it. And you know what? In all these years, I've only listened to it one time because it's that hard to get through for me. And the whole thing started, the regressionist took me back to the very first time I had an encounter with these beings. I was standing in my bedroom, in my crib, holding onto the rails, and this little man just materialized through the wall. Big headed. I mean, I even drew a picture of him after I came out of the regression. A large cranium, small eyes, not the big black almond shaped upturned eyes. This was just a very small, frail man with a large cranium, and he was just a friend. He was just a friend. In fact, I didn't even remember this, but after I did the hypnosis, I asked my mom. I said, "Mom, did I ever have an invisible friend?" And she goes, "Oh yeah, you and your older brother both had an invisible friend." She goes, "Sometimes you guys are so adamant I have to set a place at the table for him." And I had no memory of that, but and neither does my older brother, who was also had this same invisible friend. So he has no memory, and he doesn't even believe in UFOs. Even after I did the regression, the headache stopped. So that really helped. And then we just did I think an hour and a half, and we just kind of scraped the surface of what, of the times that I've been taken. So I can't talk. The only person in my family I can talk to about that is my sister, because she shared the same bedroom with me. So she had some memories of, the way these things would pop in the room. But now I have 3 children, and, one of my biggest fears as a parent was that they were going to also disturb my kids, and they did. And that's the hardest part. Fortunately, they erase their memory mostly, but occasionally they will leave signs behind. I think this was 95 or 96. My son came walking into the kitchen. I think I was making breakfast, and he came walking in the kitchen and a very strange look on his face. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Come to my room." So I walked down the hall with him and got in his room, and he closed the door, and he sat down on his bed, and he pulled his boxers down, and he had a triangular shaped puncture mark in his groin. I don't know if you've ever seen what a smallpox shot looks like. When we were kids, we got these in our arm. I guess it was the device was round, and it had needles, like needles that were in a circle, and it was punctures. And whenever they punctured so my son had a perfect triangle with three puncture marks on his groin. And he said, "Mom, what is that?" And I, of course, I immediately thought, "Oh, crap. Now they're taking samples and doing stuff with my kids, still." And then my daughter walked in. She's 2 years older than he is. And she goes, Nathan showed her, and she left the room and went to her room. And about 10 seconds later, we heard her scream, and she had the same puncture mark on her groin, just in a different place. And I'm working with some people. I'm working with a woman right now who was abducted when she was younger, and she reached out to me wanting to talk to me, and I guess she's at that point where she felt like she needed to share her story. And she said, "You're the only person I want to do this with." And, I'm always so deeply honored when someone says that, because I know how difficult it is, being that I understand the terror. And she was really good. Like, she gave me her full description and everything. And I started working on the first sketch. And man, she went from being pretty okay with what had happened to, "I am not okay at all." And that has happened. That's the hardest part of my job of recreating what these people are seeing, is when they get to see it again, like what it does to them. I mean, it hurts my heart. It literally just hurts my heart. And I'm not usually in the same space, because I work with people all over the country, so I can't go hug them. I can't prepare them. I just say, "Okay, here's the first iteration," and I send it to them. And one time there was a woman, Dogman witness, and I sent her. I mean, we were kind of up. It was maybe the third or fourth iteration, and I said, "I sent you one." She opened it, and the phone just dropped, and there was nobody there for a few minutes. And then her daughter picked up the phone, and she goes, "I'm sorry, Miss Irwin, my mom's in the bathroom throwing up." And I'm like, "Oh,
Oh my gosh.
I'm so sorry." And you can't be there with them, Oh, that is the hardest part. So it makes them raw, just all over again, because they kind of build up a scab. You kind of compartmentalize, because I don't care what you've seen and what's happened to you. Matt can tell you the same thing. You still have a life to live. You have people depending on you. You have children. So you have to keep your act together. You can't just fall apart. So you find a way to just take that, whatever those experiences are, and you just put them, you put them in some compartmentalized place in your brain, and you don't think about it unless when you kind of have to think about it, or something occurs and then you're forced, it's in your face again. So that's the hardest part of working with people, is I can't be there to just hold them while they're re-experiencing their trauma. That's the hardest part for me.
Was that the white dog man that you drew?
No, uh, uh, we haven't finished her sketch. And she oh my gosh, and I want so much. Now, she's told her story on, I think it was Dogman Encounters, of it kind of, and it's still, I mean, and she's reached out to me, and I said, "Let's go back to work on it." And then we kind of schedule the time to talk about it, and something kind of comes and goes, and I don't get to, but I still really want I really want to finish her sketch, and I really want to illustrate her encounter, because it's right up there with Matt's. What happened to these two girls? Like, they were literally trapped in a car, and this thing is trying to figure out how to get in. It's trying the doors. It's trying the trunk.
As you are hearing her story and you're getting all the details down for the illustration, is there a lot of physical similarities to what Matt saw?
It was dark. It was at night, but this thing put its face right up to the window, and she could also see its private parts and everything. And again, she was just a child. She was just a child too. Like, I think if she's not 14, maybe 14 or 15. Like, she was just a child too.
I almost wonder how some of these people don't just disassociate. And I know I've studied, when I was in college, I studied a little bit of psychology, but psychology really fascinates me, and how the human brain responds to a myriad of situations, whether, pleasure, happiness, sad, whatever, something. And I know you know this, something that's you see very commonly in trauma victims of all kinds, very intense trauma. And I know that varies from individual to individual, is you almost like disassociate. If there's anyone listening to this who's an expert in this, like, please correct me. But I believe that is a part of where split personality disorder comes from, because the brain all of a sudden has this, and it's like, well, we have to preserve the self. So what do we do with this? Well, split personality. The image you drew for Matt, I knew you drew multiple of them, but there's one in particular that you drew where it's looking at the side and it's baring its teeth. What stood out to me the most is not just that it's frightening, but, and I told this to Matt because I hadn't looked at them, honestly, like probably since we probably did the first interview. What I told him had frightened me so much was that from here, about roughly here, to probably like this whole area here, like where I don't have any hair, was so human-like in complexion and bone facial structure that you can see that it was clearly capable of conveying human level emotion. And unfortunately, those emotions were nefarious and evil. And that's that to me was far scarier than the teeth or anything else about it. And he said, and I said, is that really it? And he goes, yeah. Yeah. He goes, the only thing Sybilla didn't nail, he's like, what was the glowing eyes? He's like, but make the eyes glow. And he's like, that's what it was. I basically just told him, I said, I don't know how you didn't end up going insane. And as you know, two of his friends are gone.
How do you survive?
It's terrible.
How did he find the strength to survive that at 14 years old? Except for the fact that he did have the friends to talk to. I mean, they did have each other, thank God. I guess, and everybody deals with that kind of trauma, differently. Everyone has their own processes of that, and you have to honor them, obviously. When you're just left all alone with that, plus, what happens to you, at night whenever you go to sleep, and the nightmares that come. And then I've worked with some witnesses, and the witness sketch have helped them, with the nightmares. Sometimes the man who saw the white skinwalker kind of thing, he was having horrible. He just wasn't sleeping, and somehow the sketches helped him, kind of break that pattern. He started sleeping again.
That was that coyote-looking thing, right? The white one.
Yeah. He kind of felt like it followed him home. I think the thing that shocked me the most, when I start working with a witness, first conversation is usually they're telling me their story, and then after I hear their story, then I start asking, the thousands of questions that come out, because I have to build the image in my head of what they saw. So it's 100 questions about the shape of the eyes and the configuration of how they proportioned all the skull itself, and then I have to build with the nose. And it's just a lot of time with a lot of questions, and I wear them out. And I think in a way that kind of helps them, because they have to use that part of the brain that's the more analytical, logical side instead of the emotional side, and I think it kind of helps, especially if they've been traumatized. It helps kind of, I don't know, it takes the heat off a little bit, just going from that side of your brain where you're really having to describe something. And they a lot of times they don't really realize how much they remember until I start asking them, okay, like for instance, like what's the space between the nose and the top lip? Is it large, or is it, can you tell me? And then they're, you can hear them. Well, it's longer than ours. It's maybe twice the size of ours. And then, so then, I have to ask about the bridge of the nose and the width of the nostril. What shape are the nostrils? And so they discover that they realize a lot more detail than they thought, because sometimes I start with them and they're thinking, I don't really remember that much of the facial features. And then I start asking them questions. And like, oh yeah, I do remember, and so a lot of times a lot more detail will come out. Ernie got so close to this guy, he had extraordinary detail of what it was. I think the thing that shocked me the most, it was a really beautiful face, and he said, this looks like this is a man. This is like a kind of an Aboriginal cross between an Aboriginal man and
young too, like I'd say early 20, in his 20, like a young man.
Handsome. Yeah, really handsome. And but when I because I start working in black and white first, and then after I get the black, once I get the first iteration and they say that's it, then I add the color. And then when I put the blue eyes in, oh my gosh, it like sat me back in my chair. It was really striking. It was really something, and it took my breath away. And then the next part of the process is I draw first I start with their face, and then I work on the body. And then once I get the body sketch, with Ernie, there was a whole lot happened, but that thing walked to him. So, and it's doing hand gestures. So I had to draw all of those. So it took a long time to do all those illustrations. And then I had to try to figure out what the background looked like. And, Ernie was such a big help with all that. He did a great job. And there's a little part of missing time there with Ernie. I don't know if he talked about it. There's a little break in the time thing when it came up so close. And then the next thing he remembers, he talked to you about that a little bit. There's a little break in the footage somewhere. No, he's not the only witness that has seen Sasquatch with blue eyes.
Really?
Yes. I worked with another witness. I met her when I was working at the Sasquatch Museum in Georgia. She said, well, I've seen one. Would you be willing to do my sketch? Absolutely, I will. So, and she was a child, and this thing I guess her mother burned something like in the oven. And so she took it out of the oven and it was all smoky. And so she was trying to get the smoke out of the kitchen. So she opened the kitchen window and this little girl had a desk there. And while her mother was cooking, she would be sitting at that window with her crayon, coloring book doing stuff. And the window was open because her mom opened it. She dropped a crayon. And when she went down to get it, when she came up, the Sasquatch was right there in the window looking at her. Blue eyes, whitish, really silver white hair, and blue, icy blue eyes, and it's real kind of a sad, like sad. I had a very sad expression, very human though. So when Ernie said it had blue eyes, I didn't was like I didn't I was like, well, here's another blue-eyed Sasquatch, but I just can't believe there's still people, well-known people, sitting on the fence saying these are some kind of apish thing. I just and all the witness sketches I've done, there's only been a handful of people that have said this is kind of a cross between a human and an ape. I think there's a whole lot more people that are hopefully going to come forward who didn't see a patty. What they saw was more human looking, and they just haven't been willing to come forward and describe it because it wasn't a patty. Like they will say, and I've have people contact me and say, look, patty is not what I saw. What I saw was 100% human looking, 8 feet tall or 9 feet tall and totally hair covered, but it was totally human in the face. So I think more and more people are reaching out, or maybe they're just more willing to come forward now that's, I don't know. Are you seeing that too? That people are saying it's a more human face?
The advent of paranormal, supernatural, cryptozoology niche community kind of like blowing up in the last 5 years has really helped open the doors for people that it's like such a big thing. And a lot of people are like, this is a thing and I can come forward with my experience. The more I look into these things, they're not just like these Neanderthal looking ape things. In fact, as you know, descriptions vary a lot. I've heard of, fully white ones. And, I've heard stories where people see in the faces, they talk about that the complexion was like, is clearly an older man. And then he was with a younger one who looked like he was in his 20s. They're more like a tribe, very intelligent. They handle their dead. They bury their dead. I've heard that from many stories. The only way you can find that information out, like what you do, is you have to, sift through so many witnesses and reports and stories over the years. And you start to kind of like put together this mind map, this mental database in your head. And then you kind of start to map together all the similarities. You're like, wow. And you're like, there's more to this web than we could have imagined. It's mind boggling.
It is. I think we've only scratched the surface, really only scratched the surface of what these things, who they are and what they're capable of. Yeah. If these were just dumb animals, and of course, I don't think any animal is dumb. I just think they're here doing what they do, and their capabilities and senses serve, their incarnation, what they are this lifetime. It just blows my mind that people still think that they're just, if they're really just some dumb animal, we would have them all over on every trail camera. There's thousands of trail cameras out there in the universe right now. I became, when I first became an investigator, a lot of people just thought that this was some, apish thing that had evaded, detection, yada, yada. There was an investigation that I was part of the team in East Texas, Jasper, Texas. And this family had a piece of property that was way out in the middle of the woods. It was given to him, I think, by his father. There was an old house that was like falling apart. And this couple, it was a man and a woman and their son, had just a little camper out there, and they would spend weekends out there. And so, stuff started happening where, they'd go out there. They had a gate, and there was a night light out there, a real bright light that would come on. I don't know if it was like photosensitive or it would just come on at night or whatever. But the owner discovered that it wasn't working properly. Every time he'd go out there, it was off. So, he'd get a ladder, put a new bulb in, and then finally one day he realized something is just unscrewing the bulb. Like something's just backing the bulb out. And it was tall. Like he had to get a ladder to get up there. And so he what in the world would just be unscrewing that light bulb? So that was the first where and how, what guys are, they just kind of ponder things and then they just go about their business. So that's what he did. And then they brought a big doghouse. It was made out of plywood. And you know how heavy, like 3/4 plywood is. I think it took 4 men to put this doghouse on their truck and to take it off, at the little camper. They came out one weekend and that doghouse is 80 yards away in the forest. And then that's when they saw the footprints, these massive footprints. So that's when he realized, oh my gosh, and where do I go? So he found the BFRO, he filed a report. And so we went out there. We went out there a couple of times and this guy started putting up a little feeding station and started feeding him. He had a little wind chime. He'd ring the wind chime. And there was a stand of trees that was away from the camper, and there were some deadfalls. So he had kind of a blind, so they had some privacy, and he'd feed him. So one of the investigators that lived in the Houston area, really, really super good friend of mine, Ron, he borrowed 8 of the finest Reconnex cameras that they were making back, in 2008. I mean, these are $800 cameras a piece back in that day. He's real proud of himself. He gets those cameras and he goes to the location. He calls me that evening. He goes, I'm going to get them. He's so excited. He told me how he placed the cameras in the trees such that if this camera's firing, that they, when one camera's kicking off, the others are going to be kicking off too. Like there's no way. He also put one over the feeding station so that you could see hands or whatever coming in. So he had it all figured out. He was very proud of himself. And he's a smart guy. Don't get me wrong. I get a call the next morning, and I made the mistake of putting my headset right up next to my head, and he starts cussing up. He's yelling in my ear until he put the phone. And I won't say the words he said, but they moved the cameras. Like they just, he put them up a bungee cord, so they just turned the cameras. But he went out the next morning. And he had stayed there that night. All the cameras were turned. And so he said, well, that's not going to stop me. So he goes into town and he gets the really long screws and brackets. And he's going to, he spends the rest of that day bracketing them all. So the next morning, the phone rings again, and I'm smart. I don't put it next to my head this time. So, he's cussing again. They bent the brackets. Now he had to use, a ladder. He was using, an extension ladder to put these things up. They were not just so that anybody could get to them. But he showed me pictures, that those brackets are, that's heavy metal. They were bent. And then some of the cameras were even pointed at the camper. Like, we'll show you how much you like having cameras pointed at you. I mean, so not only were they smart enough to, change the angles of the camera, but they had a sense of humor about it too. By the time he just gave up, he had over $8,000 images, and not a single one of them had, a Sasquatch in it. Now he did show me there's images of there's food in the feeding station, and then all these sticks and stuff go flying through the frame, and then these cameras, I guess they take a whole bunch of pictures and then they have to reset. So these dumb animals, they figured out the sequence. So they throw sticks and stuff through there, and then the food is gone in the next frame. And he sent me the sequence of, I got to see the sequence of that, and that from that point on, and that was early on in my my whole research career. I realized this is not some dumb animal. These are extremely, extremely intelligent beings that we're working with here. He also, so the whole game camera thing didn't work out. So he said, we know that they're coming up to that light and backing the light out. I'm going to put a camera, which is real smart. I'm going to put a camera in the back of that, and when they come up, at least I'll get a hand. Again, he tells me what he's going to do, and then, the next morning I get the call, and he's cussing up a storm, and then he just starts laughing. He says, there's no point whatsoever in hiding cameras from these things. They just, he said, they could have ripped all the lines out. They could have ripped, because there were obviously lines coming out of the back of that thing that they obviously noticed, because they're not a dumb animal. He said, they just unscrewed the coaxial cables at the bottom. So from that point on, he didn't try to ever hide a camera again. He said, because you're not going to fool these things. I mean, we tried to hide them. We put them in the grills of our vehicles, a little camera. Like, who's going to see that? I mean, as a human being, I wouldn't even see that. I mean, I know I've walked through hundreds of trail cameras and never seen them, but because I used to kind of trespass a little bit when I was in Kentucky. We would hide them in, flower pots and ice chests and, all sorts of places. They bust them every time. Every time. And then, another crazy experiment he did is he set his tent up out there, and he, those little aluminum camping tents, it's, just, they're like $30, and you just fold them out. So he put a pizza right next to his tent, and then he put the camera over here so that it's covering, the focal range of this camera covers that pizza and his tent. He also had an audio recorder going. And so he hears something walk up, and how does it know this? But it knows that the view of that camera would catch it if it goes for that pizza. So it just grunts and growls and stomps and, is kind of pissed off and walks away. Now, if that's a dumb animal, how did it know that the camera, went to that certain point of the view? Nobody could tell me this is a stupid animal. See, from that point on, that changed the way I thought. And that was really early on in my research career. The first time I saw one was 2008 in Honobia, Oklahoma, which has a very famous history of Bigfoot interaction.
That's wild to me that you mentioned that, because that's another episode I'm working on, is the famous siege of Honobia. This is really weird.
Okay, well, so place that I first got zapped at, I got the very first place I got hit with infrasound at is catty corner to that property. And the man who bought that property bought it specifically because of its location to the Humphrey. Well, they were literally just shooting deer off the porch. So anytime they would shoot, it was like ringing a dinner bell. They kind of conditioned the Sasquatch there. Like literally they had planted like those special peas or something that drew all the deer. And then they would just sit on their porch and shoot deer and then go get them. And then the Sasquatch started, got wise to the fact that whenever they heard a gunshot, well, there's probably a deer, and they just go pick them up. So the Sasquatch started picking up the deer. And then, the freezer was outside at first. It kept getting broken into. And then they brought it inside, which was a big mistake, because then the Sasquatch started beating on the house, which I can't even imagine how terrifying that. I mean, I've been in a house where, they hit it, and it's terrifying to be woken up at 2 a.m. by a sound like that. And I was living in a brick house at the time. Smack the house, and they smacked the house so hard. They must. I don't think they hit the brick. I think there's that eave part, like right underneath. Where there's that wooden area. I think that's what they hit.
They have the power to just break in the house, but they're also intelligent enough to know that they're like, that's not a good idea. I should do this. I should be a little more stealthy and kind of like test. Look for weak points. There's problem solving, strategy, and thought that goes into how they handle things. Yeah, that's human. It's not an animal.
No, these are not. And the first time I got hit with infrasound, I've been hit at least 3 times. And the first time was catty corner to the Humphrey property. We had been up on a ridge doing some research, and I don't know if you've ever been so sleepy that you're standing up and you're starting to fall asleep. That's how tired I was. Like, we were up on this ridge, and we'd been doing some research, and I was standing up, kind of leaning up against a truck, and I'm dozing off. That's how sleepy I was. And so we finally, jumped back in it's a Pinsgauer, which is, I don't know if you know what a Pinsgauer is. It's this amazing kind of amphibious military vehicle that this guy, Marc, had. We jumped back in the Pinsgauer, and I'm sitting in the back. When we get back to his property, it's kind of a winding road back up to the home spot. He was building a cabin by himself, and he's living in a little Connex box that he has out there. So that's where the Connex box is. Just something kind of weird happened on the way to park in the vehicle. Like, this deer busted out in front of the vehicle. Like, I'd rather die from the vehicle than from what's chasing me. Kind of. I mean, it was in a panic. It was real. I mean, we all kind of looked at each other like, that was weird. And then we got around. Marc jumped out of the truck, The tailgate kind of had this weird latch so that we couldn't do it from the inside. Maybe it was broken. I don't know. Marc jumped around, opened up the tailgate. I jumped out. The other guy that was with us was in the ice chest, I think, getting some water. I'm standing out there. Marc started heading for the Connex box to turn the AC on to cool it down. And out of the right side of my ear, I heard this. It was very soft. It wasn't like super loud. I mean, I didn't get screamed at. It started as like a soft moan kind of like sound. And then all of a sudden, my whole body, like my bones, my rib cage, everything just started violently shaking from this sound. And I think I kind of grabbed the vehicle because my knees felt like I was going to go down or something. I mean, I've never experienced anything like that, like in my life, where my everything's shaking. I mean, the closest thing, if you've ever been to a rock concert and you're close enough to the big woofers, where you can feel the bass in your chest, but amplify that like 100 times. That's what my body was doing. I expected the guy up in the truck to turn around and say, what the F is that? Because to me, it was so loud. Everything was so amplified to me. I just couldn't imagine I'm the only one hearing and sensing this. And then I guess he turns around and sees I'm got this look on my face. He jumps down and he says, "What's the matter?" And I'm like, "You didn't hear that?" And he said, "What?" And I'm like, just shaking all over. And he yells at Marc. He says, "Oh, crap, she's just got zapped." And because I told him what happened. Well, it freaked him out so bad. We didn't even stay there that night.
Jeez.
Like, here's two grown men that like, I'm not staying here tonight. So I think one of them already had like a hotel, a little motel down there. There was a restaurant there at the time, and had little rooms there. And I think he already had one booked. So we just stayed there for the night because they were too afraid. And you know what, Josh? I didn't go to sleep that night. As tired as I had been so tired. I was falling asleep standing. I could not sleep. Having your whole body vibrated like that, I couldn't sleep. And every time I would relive it, the event, I would just get chills all over. Like, it was such a strange thing. Guess October. So that happened in the summer with getting zapped. Well, then that October, we had a expedition in a 5-bedroom cabin on a property that nobody had lived on for 5 years. And this was just like a mile and a half from the Humphreys house. So we know there's Sasquatches there. And and you hear that a lot where people, when a home has been like not lived in for a lot of years, and then you put people there, like the Sasquatch are like, "What are you people doing here?" Like, they come check you out. We're having an expedition, a BFRO expedition. Some people are staying up in the cabin, and then there's a group of us that are camping down in a pasture right next to the creek bed. Like, there's a pasture, there's a dry creek bed, and then a creek. And I picked that location because there were a bunch of trees, and I figured this is a great place for the Sasquatch to come and observe us, but still, feel safe because they've got all this cover. Plus, they can be down in the creek bed, and watching us, and we'll never know they're there. I'm thinking I'm all smart doing this. So first night of the expedition is it's just the investigators. The participants don't come until like the next day. So we set up our camp, and you scout around and you have everything prepared for those guys. Well, so there's some of us are sitting around the campfire. My friend Ron from Houston, the one that had all the trail camera stuff, he had just gone through Hurricane Ike. So, he had not slept in a couple of weeks because I don't know how familiar you are with Houston, but Houston, even in October, is still pretty hot. And so he didn't have any air conditioner or anything. So he was exhausted. So he was with us at the campfire for a little while, and then he said, "Guys, I'm losing it. I got to go to sleep." Well, his tent happened to be closest to that tree line, so we're just sitting around the campfire yucking it up. It's an investigator from Missouri and Colorado and myself, and we're just telling jokes and being goofy. And someone up at the cabin, gets on the radio and says, "Hey guys, we're going to do like a vocalization, and just to let you know." So we're like, "Fine." So he does a vocalization, and you sit around quietly waiting to see if there's going to be a reply. We didn't hear nothing, and someone says, "Sybilla, why don't you do one?" And I said, "Okay." So we radioed, "Okay, we're going to do a vocalization." So they were like 10-4. I'm 5'1", 110 pounds, but I was a cheerleader, so I got a big set of lungs. So I get up there and I do a vocalization, and man, just a few seconds later, we get a call, and maybe it's because it's a feminine voice. I don't know. So we got a call, and so we all kind of looked at each other like, but it's far, it's far away. It's not up close. So well, that was kind of cool. So we went back to sitting at the fire, and then about 15 minutes later, they call up at base camp again and say, hey, we're going to do another vocal. And we say, okay. So they do. No response. So then I get up and I do another vocalization, and instantly we get a call back. And this time it has cut the distance in half. You could tell it was closer. So, that's pretty exciting. Something's kind of coming in to check you out. And it's kind of, it's kind of scary, creepy, but it's also, it's exciting. So we sit back down and someone's telling a joke or something. And all of a sudden, Ron, who's in his tent, he pipes up and he goes, guys, and I hate to bother you, but something's throwing stuff at my tent. And so I happen to have a thermal XP thermal camera in my lap. So I fire it up. Now, unfortunately, these cameras are just for viewing only. There's no ability to record in these cameras. I mean, they were, back in the day, they were an $8,000 camera. They're really, really awesome. And the BFRO had quite a few of them. And they would ship them around to the various expeditions. So, we always had some thermal cameras with us. And then one of the BFRO guys had developed like a little harness where you could put a DVR, and there were special cables that connected this DVR with a battery pack to these thermal eyes. So, but they had not come in yet because this is the day before the expedition. So I have no ability to record what happened, which is horrific because it was such a great encounter. Anyway, so I fire up you have to wait till it launches itself. I walked right up to his tent. I'm standing right in the corner, and I pointed into the woods, and I'm not really expecting anything, because I've spent a lot of time looking through thermal cameras. There's a lot of rocks that, hold heat. And there's a lot of, there's animals, of course. But there was instantly a heat signature, on this tree. And of course, that could be a squirrel, that could be an owl, it could be a raccoon, it could be a lot of things. So I'm just hold the camera there waiting to see what kind of critter I'm looking at. And then all of a sudden, out of this thing, and I mean slow, just slowly starts leaning out. And I see this whole head and shoulder thing peeping out from the tree at me. And I just could not believe, like when something like that happens, Josh, you think you're prepared for it, but you're just not. This is a real human looking form, just slow. And so I didn't even tell, I didn't say anything because I'm kind of in shock. And it watches me for a while, and then it slowly goes back in. And I just kept the camera there, and then it comes out the other side. Same thing, just slow, just looking at me. And I still didn't say anything. Like I don't know why, but it's almost like those guys weren't even there. It's just me and this creature. We're just having this peekaboo, moment. And then it disappears for a while. And then I still just keep the camera there. It has a pretty wide focal range. The next thing I know, the tree next to it, here it comes again. Like it dropped down, went behind this tree, came up on a different tree, and now it's starting the whole process of looking at me again. And then it came out, went back, and it came out the other side. And so finally, like, I don't know, I kind of woke up out of my shock, and I finally turned to them, I'm like, gosh, I've been watching one for this whole time. So what do? Get out of their chairs and come stand behind me. So, this thing obviously figured out, oh man, I'm busted there, because now they're standing and they're all looking in my direction. And that's when it got really interesting, because then this creature realized, like I said, it was busted. So it just stepped out, and then I got to see the entire profile of this creature as it walked off into the woods. Just amazing. And it was, it really looked like a football player, like with the helmet and the big shoulder pads, like the way the head was positioned on the shoulders was just like a big old linebacker in his gear, and a little bit of a forward, the shoulders were a little bit, kind of forward stooping. And you couldn't hear a thing either as it walked off into the forest. Like there was no sound. If I didn't have a thermal camera on it, I never would have known it was there. Of course, I was lit up like the 4th of July. Here it is. This is my first year as an investigator, and I'm actually, got to see a Sasquatch. I didn't get to see its face or anything, but, it's really clear. So we went and sat back down by the fire. And of course, I'm just like so excited. What an amazing experience. And it was just so peaceful. There's nothing scary or aggressive about it. About 20 minutes later, I just had this weird feeling. Fired up the thermal camera again. I went and stood right back in the same place, and I'll be dang if it wasn't back. So it came back. And that's when I wasn't greedy. I passed off the thermal camera so that other people could see it too. So that was cool. So other people got to see it as well. The next day, it took me forever to go to sleep. I was so excited. But the next day, stepped out of the tent. I was shocked because, when you look through a thermal camera, your depth perception it's not great. That night, I thought I was looking at these little, maybe 2.5, 3 foot tall bushes were in front of the tree line. And when I stepped out the next morning, those were 6 foot tall cedar trees, which then the shock hit me over the size of this thing. Like I didn't realize looking through the thermal camera just how massive this thing was until the next day when I stepped out and I realized that those were 6 foot tall cedars, because this thing was towered over all of that.
Yeah. That's wild. That's so cool. What an amazing story.
It was fantastic. And then the next night, so that was the Wednesday. And then the next night, it was a crazy expedition. Like so much stuff happened in that expedition. The next night was the first time I got to see eye glow. People talk about that. In fact, the investigator that was standing with me when this happened did not believe in that. Like he had never seen it. And we're standing there, and I wanted to stay there because I thought, well, maybe this guy will come back. He was here last night. Maybe he'll come back. And so it was Dennis Foll. He's an investigator, one of my best friends. Him and his wife absolutely love and adore them. They're like my soul family. You got your soul tribe. Him and his wife are like my soul tribe. So we're standing in the back of his pickup truck. The cab is pointed forward, and we're just got our elbows just talking quietly. And all of a sudden in the tree line, just white, glowing eyes. And there's no moon. Nobody's shining a flashlight. This is, there's so many people who think that eye glow is just some self-reflection, or like some reflection from some either ambient light or some other light source, being reflected. It's not. It is not. It was pitch black that night, and these are glowing eyes. And I turned to Dennis and I said, "You're seeing that, right?" You're seeing what I'm seeing. And he's like, "Yeah." Ta-da, wasn't there a minute before, and then there it is, blink. What the heck is that? What the heck is that? So, that's just another mystery in regards to these beings, that they can do that. And now I've worked with multiple witnesses who have also seen eye glow. I don't know if you've seen Marc Richardson from British Columbia. Like he got to see eye glow, like seriously up close and personal. Like this Sasquatch is just on the other side of the glass, and it rolls its eyes up, and he can see like a green glow at the base of its eyes. So there's a part one and a part two. And the part one is, that he was a young man, maybe 21. Sasquatch is not on this man's radar. His family bought this beautiful, totally off-grid remote cabin, and he just wanted to get away from civilization for a while. He wanted to fix up this cabin. He had planned to be out there for like a year or two on his own, just fixing up this cabin, fishing, enjoying life. And, he wasn't there very long when weird stuff started happening. And just like a lot of people, he just kept writing it off to, either someone's just messing with him, or, you just don't know what to do with weird stuff, and stuff being left at your back porch, or you come back and your chairs are all turned over, just weird stuff, something throwing pine cones at you, something, he would grade the driveway and then something would come and bring up the rocks all back. It just, stuff was messing with him and he just didn't know what it was. So part one of that episode, he's just describing like what happened prior to this one night when all kind of heck breaks loose. And in part two, you get to hear about this female and this male showing up on his porch. He does a beautiful job of explaining what happened, and he had some incredible things happen to him. Like he got zapped big time. Josh, he got zapped so hard it knocked him out of his body. Like it knocked his consciousness out of his body. Like he saw himself above his body. Yeah, you have to watch part one and part two of his incredible encounter. And wait till you see the artwork that we did together. And that's something I want to say about these witnesses is that the witnesses that I get to work with are just phenomenal people. Like I couldn't do what I do without them. Like they literally guide my hand. It's not me. I mean, they just tell me what to draw. And it's literally a partnership with these witnesses.
There's one that I saw, and this is what when I was interviewing Ernie and I was trying to find his 15 foot from a massive angry Sasquatch protecting a female in the title cut off. Oh, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Tell me about that one. Something,
Yes.
Jesse
Yes.
Sampson?
Yeah, that's a more recent one. Well, he's just hiking out in the Sierra Nevadas with his dog. His dog keys in on something behind this bush. And so they stop, and this female stands up behind the bush. Beautiful face. Like, wait till you see her face. She's stunningly beautiful. Just observing them, and they're just observing each other. I mean, you're shocked when you see something, of course, beautiful face, but still massive. And she's tall and hair covered. And then they hear this sound, up the trail, and here comes the male. Don't know if that's her father. Don't know if he doesn't know, but it was angry, and it's terrifying. When this thing, came right for him. I mean, he just dropped down on the ground in a fetal position. The dog took off and left him. Probably saved his life. The fact that he just, yeah, I mean, it was there for a while, huffing and puffing, and he tells a story. It's a terrifying looking thing. But just feet away, after they left, because the two left together, he went over and looked at what was behind the bush, and there was some blood. So maybe she was menstruating. He kind of felt like she was hiding from the male. So he doesn't know. We'll never know what the true story was there. But
this one is, it's a short. I think it's the only short you've done. The huge dogman creature eating roadkill. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know the story, but that image, that's enough to creep me out.
Actually, that is not a big dogman. That thing was, and this is the only time I've ever heard someone describe a creature that is only like 3.5 feet tall. Could have been. It could have been. And that man was a sheriff, and he just put it in reverse and because it started coming for him. Like he's on a dark country road, and he saw this thing. I guess it was fighting. There was a female, and then the two males, and they were fighting. He saw one pick the other one up and throw it. It was all crumpled, and thinks it killed the other one. And then this thing came for him. And so because he was standing outside his car watching this whole thing happen, then he jumps back in his car and just hits it in reverse and takes off. And then he said, after I got a distance away, I felt like a moron. Like, why was I so afraid? I mean, it didn't look like that big a creature, but I guess it was fierce enough, and he saw what it did to that other thing. So
I know you spend a lot of time with eyewitnesses. You really go over every little detail, but as an artist, how do you, from ideation to a completed sketch, right?
Well, I take a ridiculous amount of notes, obviously. Sometimes they'll say stuff, sometimes I'll ask them, okay, if this was, if it's a Sasquatch thing, if this was a nationality here, some on Earth, is there a facial, are they more European looking? Are they more, Aboriginal? Are they look from what country would you say they closely, reside to? So, and they'll usually, have an idea. And then I'll go study those faces. I'll go study those features, even screen grab some just so I can study the way faces are put together. I used to do portraits, and they're so extremely difficult to do because a 1/16 of an inch off, on the corner of the eye or the tilt of the eye, or the way the nose meets the face. I mean, that you can be a 1/16 of an inch off somewhere, which doesn't sound like much, but people will say, "Well, it's close." It's close, but that doesn't really look like that person. And you study it, and it drives you crazy trying to figure out why. It's not right, but trying to figure out structurally, faces are fascinating. And so I will go study the features of that face, and I'll ask them, okay, so what is it that makes you say that it was a Neanderthal looking? And they'll say, well, the bone, the whole brow ridge is just massive, and the eyes are kind of, huge and kind of sunken in. And so they'll give me a lot of things. So that's where I'll start. I may just go grab an image of a Neanderthal and upload it to Photoshop, and then start manipulating that image to the specifications that they've told me. I don't want to have to create the wheel every time, so I'll go find a boxer's nose that has been smashed in a whole bunch of times, and I'll go steal it, I'll go grab it, and I'll plug it in there, and then really, that's kind of what it is. And then I'll create an iteration, and once I feel like it's reached close enough to what they've told me, the details of, then I'll send it to them, and I'll say, this is literally a shot in the dark. Don't worry about it if it doesn't look close. We'll get it there eventually. Just tell me what I need to fix. And so they'll tell me, oh, the eyes need to be bigger, or, the nose is shorter or longer, or needs to be here, X, Y, Z. And sometimes I get very close on the first iteration. Sometimes when they're describing the creature, I get a really clear image. Like there's a little bit of, I'm a little bit psychic sometimes. Like sometimes they'll tell me stuff. Sometimes they won't tell me something, and I'll draw it anyway because I just feel compelled to. And they'll say, "Well, how did you know to do that?" And I'll say, "I don't know. I have a tablet that I have a stylus, so yeah, I'm drawing." Like the hair, that's all. When you see the hair, I mean, I'm either using like this. Yeah, it's a stylus. So I'm hand drawing all of the hair in, or I'm using my mouse to draw the hair in.
I can only imagine how much time you're spending on just like mapping out, not even just the details, but like the texture. And like, for example, like this one right here, paralyzed by a spark from the eyes of a Sasquatch only inches away. Like the detail in the eyes, like I could tell you took time to map out the skin texture and also the glint of like light from the eyes. Like just doing a lot of Photoshop myself, that's very time consuming.
No, it is. But when people have seen, especially Marc, because that's Marc Richardson from British Columbia. That's the one that I was telling you about. When he was literally just on the other side of the glass of a huge picture window, this thing put its face right in the window at him. And it's massive. It is a massive head. So when he's describing, and he can, all of the wrinkles and stuff under here, I mean, you've got to try to put them in. I mean, I have to try.
Do you draw them in, or do you like take skin textures and kind of like, mess with the overlay and stuff and kind of blend them in?
I will. Yeah. I'll go get samples of real wrinkles. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, if you would look at the PSD file, it may have, and if they see like an animal texture, I'll go look up that animal texture, and I will try to actually use that texture, or a lot of people will say it was like the hair of a Irish setter, like color wise. So I'll go get samples of Irish setter. I feel so deeply committed to getting it as close to what they saw as I can, because these things don't want to be photographed. This is the best shot that we have of making it look as realistic as, this is it. It's all we have. I mean, there may be people out there who have photos, but they're not sharing them. And I can't say it. I can't say I don't blame them for not sharing them, because they're just going to get knocked down, especially with the advent of AI, oh my gosh.
I think a workaround for that, and this is something I've implored, is instead of like doing illustration, because to me an illustration is something an artist should do. Instead, something that an artist can't really do is like a cinematic still. And that's much tougher to convey. So I like when I do stuff for my episodes, I always try to do it in the vein of like a paranormal documentary, muted colors, depth of field, very sharp, very detailed. That to me is like that's how it should be done. But, I unfortunately see a lot of people in like Facebook groups, like, making fake AI trail cam pictures and be like, this is real. And I'm like, oh. Like, if you're going to do that, at least like you should do it and just post in the group and be like, what do you guys think? Or like where this, like let people speculate, but don't like say like, oh, that this is for sure a real thing. Like, come on, guys, come on.
And there's always going to be, there's always going to be the hoaxers too. I mean, there's always going to be those people. And that's stuff that we've had to as Bigfoot researchers, Sasquatch researchers. We've had to deal with that for forever. In fact, some of the researchers that I've known have actually been hoaxers themselves, like throwing rocks on expeditions and stuff. What? So it just takes all kinds, unfortunately. But that's just human. That's just human nature.
It's kind of the same with like witness accounts. I don't think I've really came across really anyone that I could think of off the top of my head that I felt like was pretty much lying about it. You know, when you get a lot of people who are like, hey, here's my experience, you know, please don't name me. I work at a law firm. Please don't name me. You know, I don't want to be, you know, I have, you know, people know who I am. When I get these accounts, I do try to approach it with an open mind, be like, you know what, I don't know their experience, but at the same time, I also have to be cynical and be like, oh, you know, they could be full of it. But I try to be like, okay, I'm going to give them the benefit of a doubt. You know, I come across some of these, as you know, extraordinary details that seem like it's out of a sci-fi movie. I don't know if you've ever read any of the accounts from the Albert Rosala's Humanoid Encounters database. That, you know, you want to talk about sci-fi, that just, I feel like for most people, it just sounds like complete hooey. What's really interesting about that is that those are accounts that Albert himself, I guess, has personally investigated, because he's collected these from a myriad of sources. I don't know if you're familiar with Joshua Cutchin, you know, big author.
Yes.
I don't know about big author, but yeah, he's written several books. He's written for me for quite a while. Go ahead.
In Georgia? Is he from Georgia?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I actually got to meet him in the museum.
Oh, that's cool. Really sweet guy. Really great guy. Really smart, too. Very intelligent. Yes. Yeah, he's, I guess he's good friends with the Rosalas, and so I know he's used stuff, when he's written stuff from me before, he's used stuff from them. He has like an entire series. Each book is basically like a compendium of accounts, and it's kind of written from like, you know, 1980 to 1985, 85 to like 92. Anyway, I digress.
Do you ever try to recreate what witnesses have seen as an artist?
It's something I honestly think I'd like to get into doing more, just because ever since I was in my earlier 20s, using Photoshop and just, you know, through like digital manipulation and actually creating composites with real assets has always been a heavy interest for me.
The beauty too is after you send them an iteration and they tell you what needs to be fixed, you know, tell you if they say, well, the eyes need to be, you know, at least half a size bigger. That's so, as long as you have them on separate layers in Photoshop, then you can just go into that filter, you know, and manipulate the eyes and make it bigger. You don't have to, you know, if you were sketching all that up by hand, well, then you'd have to literally start from ground zero, you know. So the beauty of Photoshop is then you can just, you know, everything is on a separate layer. So if you just need to enlarge the nose, then you can just go into that filter and enlarge the nose. If you just need to bump the nostrils out. So whatever they tell you, then fixing it can be pretty fast depending upon, you know, what they say it is. And then like I keep the hairs all in a separate layer. So if I made the hair too thick, or if I need to make it thicker, then I can just go to that layer, you know, and manipulate that layer. So it's a fantastic tool. It saves you time. And then if you want to go like super, super detail, then, you know, there you go. Because there's no way you could do that on paper.
No, and I think something like you were saying that I think a lot of people don't really think about is all the nuance and details. Like I know a lot of people, they don't think about the shadows and the highlights. That to me is like, you can't, I wouldn't say it's a secret sauce, but it kind of is, because, you know, if you mess up the shadows and the highlights, it either looks fake or it looks like overly like YouTuber vomity, you know. It's like, ew, what are you doing? So and there's a balance, you know, and that's with everything, even on the hair and like around the eyes. And it's like that there's just, and then the lighting and the coloration, like there's all these like little nuances and ways to kind of blend certain parts. And it's like, again, one thing I really admire you for is also the texture variety. Again, looking at that paralyzed by a spark, the amount of skin texture, and then also like how you got the lighting on each texture.
I haven't put an episode out in quite some time. You know, and people are like, Sybilla, you know, you're going to make some more episodes. And I am, and I'm working with witnesses now, but like Ernie's stuff took over 6 months. Matt's stuff was like, you know, we worked together, you know, like 8 to 12 months. I mean, and with Marc, the one that had the spark in its eye, that was a 2-year project. It takes a long time. It takes you know, just the sketches are one thing, but then, you know, you're making videos. You've got to edit the video too. You've got to, you know, and I discovered I love editing. Like I had no idea that was something. I mean, what a bonus. I love looking for music. I love creating opener. I just love everything about the video editing process. You know, I'm 68 years old. To discover that you have a passion for something at this age is just crazy. I grew up in that generation where if you were inside your parents, like, what are you doing? Get outside. Yeah. We drank out of water hoses and swimming pools.
Hey, you're being a kid. That's what you're supposed to do, right?
Right. No, we were kids. I had a great childhood. I had a horse, and I ran around the neighborhood like playing cowboys and Indians with my brother, and I was always the Indian getting shot off the horse. I was a tomboy. I still am a tomboy. I haven't produced a video because people are asking me, like, when's your next video? I got into this thing, and I don't know, tell me if this has happened to you. Since I'm so witness focused, it becomes like a double-edged sword for me because, YouTube wants you to be producing X amount of videos, X amount of time, for them to pick up your, to get the algorithms going and stuff. And there's something about the whole business of it that I really don't like. Like, I don't want to be making shows just for the views. That just cannot do that. It's not who I am. So I kind of just step back. Like, I just step back when it starts feeling like I'm doing something as, and in order to get views, I had to step away from that. I just needed to, because that's not what's in my heart. My heart is that I'm here for people. My heart is I'm here for people, and I don't care about the numbers. And when it starts to become something like that, like, and I know some content creators, who are like, oh, I got to do this for the show, and they're all wigged out about their numbers, and how come they're not getting them out? I don't. It can't be that for me. So I just step back, and I haven't really. I'm still working with witnesses, and I'll probably have something in maybe the next couple of weeks. But I really have to step away and just remind myself why I do this. It's not, if I'm not taking care of my witnesses, then I'm in it for the wrong reason. And I can't do it. I mean, my viewers are like, where are you? Are you okay? Because they're fantastic. I mean, I love my viewers. Like, I just had one reach out this morning. It's like, are you okay? We miss you, which I think is lovely. And I probably just need to do a little video and say, hey guys, I'm fine. And, there's things I have to take care of right now. And I am still working with witnesses, but, the whole video side is such a commitment. I mean,
Yeah.
I understand what you'll have to do with this video. I understand the kind of time it takes to, to edit and create thumbnails and, write the descriptions and all that. I mean, it all takes time. And I love it. I love it. And I'll be back. I've got other things I got to take care of right now. So
It's just so funny how people will literally give up their time, their one finite currency, for stupid things, whether it's a physical whatever or just something that's so dumb. Materialism, money, whatever it is success to me is a vehicle to spend more of my time with the people who I love, and everything else is irrelevant, it really is, because it's like things come and go. Money's, you're going to gain and lose money your entire life, so like that's whatever, that's nothing.
that's right. And if you have children, I mean, and you have children, don't you? And once they reach a certain age, man, they are gone. I mean, they still may be in your house, but they reach like those teenage years. They're totally focused on their friends, and it's a whole different ballgame once they reach that age. So while they're little, you absolutely have to take that time to enjoy them. Well, I'm very blessed that people trust me enough to share their encounters, with me, because it's a very intimate thing to tell, to trust you enough with some details. Like the Marc encounter, there was details he didn't tell me for after him and I had been speaking for over a year, because some of it was so kind of out there. He was afraid to tell me about it for the first year. And it makes you wonder too about all the witnesses that have, paranormal stuff occurred to them during their sighting, but they're not comfortable enough to really talk about that yet. And I'm hoping that we can change that. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can change that, because I've experienced so much paranormal stuff around the whole Sasquatch thing. There was a time when, there was a thing called the Erickson Project that was between, I think, 2005 to 2010. And it was, my best friend Dennis was the lead investigator on that. A Princeton biologist was put into this house where this family had interactions with Sasquatch for 25, 30 years. It was called the Erickson Project because Adrian Erickson bought that property, and then the people who had lived there before bought a home about 2 miles away. So research was going on at that property that he bought, and it was also going on 2 miles away because the Sasquatch, followed her name was Sissy. They followed Sissy over to the new house. So Sissy's mom had been, this was rural Kentucky, so, people with their leftovers, they just threw them over the fence and stuff. So that's what Sissy's mom was doing. And I guess at some point she saw them, she saw what she was feeding, and it wasn't what she thought, it was Sasquatch. And so she just kept feeding them. And I guess they kind of grew a bond, a relationship. And then Sissy, as a child, she had her first encounter at the outhouse, like with the Sasquatch people. So when Sissy's mom, I guess she gave Sissy the house and moved to another home. So Sissy continued to feed them. And so the relationship just continued. Well, one day Sissy and her husband were playing cornhole. That's what it called, that game where you toss the little, they were playing cornhole in the front yard. And I guess they were being noisy. You know how people are when they're playing games like that, just having a great time, having fun. And I guess a Sasquatch came up to the feeding area and was just down below the berm. There was this berm, and it was just, and one of the guys from next door saw it, or maybe it was Roger, Sissy's husband. Sissy's husband didn't know anything about the Sasquatch people, didn't know anything. Sissy hadn't told him. Sissy was afraid to tell him. So now Roger discovers there's this huge thing down there swaying back and forth, looking up at him, and he yells at Sissy to go get the shotgun. She doesn't want to do it. And he's a very violent, ugly person. He's abusive. So if she doesn't get the shotgun, he's going to hurt her. So she gets the shotgun, and he shoots, I guess, above its head. And it doesn't even duck. It just stands there. So maybe he thought it was a person in a suit or something. But when it didn't run off, he realized, what the heck did I just shoot at? Because it didn't react. If it was a person in a suit, they'd have, screamed, don't shoot, and dropped to the ground or whatever. Well, this thing didn't. It just stayed there, kind of just, continued to do in this way. Anyway, it eventually, I guess it left. Well, the people next door filed a report with the BFRO. So that's how this place got discovered. Because Sissy didn't want anybody to know about these beings. So the BFRO showed up next door, and then of course the neighbors, which I ended up living there for 5 years because the Erickson project closed in 2010, like the real estate market crashed. So Adrian kind of quit that researching there. So the house sat empty for 2 years. And I was on a team of people who was looking. We knew Dennis really well. We were good friends with them, and we were seeing the evidence that they were gathering there. It was fantastic. And so me and another team of friends, we were like, this is how it's going to get done. A habituation. That's what we need to do. We need to buy some property next door to habituation, or buy some property like Eric did where there's already habituation, an active site. So we were looking for one, never dreaming that the Erickson project would become available, but 2 years later it did. And so my best friend Tom, he bought it, and I quit my job as a teacher, and I moved there to Kentucky and lived in this. I didn't know a single soul. I dragged my everything up there and went and lived in this house by myself. 5 years. And it was incredible, like the things that happened. And where I was kind of going with that is like, there was stuff that happened on the property that was like super paranormal, like things moving on their own right in front of you. So was that Sasquatch related, or was that the house haunted? There's this line, and I'm not sure, except there was, my son broke up with his girlfriend. He was living in Colorado, and I said, why don't you just come hang out with me for a little while? So he did. He came to Kentucky. He lived with me for about 6 months. And my son is very open-minded, but of course he loves his mom, but he was kind of like, I don't really know what to think about all this stuff. Well, so he got to experience it himself. So he's a believer now. He wasn't, I don't think, when he moved there, but anyway, one morning I was making some coffee, and there was the house was the old part of the house, and then there was an addition that was made on that had a bathroom and another bedroom and a wash area. There was a little bit of a difference in the foundation, like maybe half an inch. And I had to put one of those little rugs from Walmart there because people kept stubbing their toes. And it's like super painful to, on the concrete when you jab your big toe into that. So I just put a carpet there, like one of those little cheap Walmart, pile rugs there. Oh, one morning I'm making coffee, standing by the stove, and I look down, and there is a footprint on that rug. And it's not in the direction of traffic. It's opposite the direction of traffic, and it's 6 inches larger than mine foot. And I know my son very well, and he's got a tell. Whenever he's a little kid, he's got this little tell. I know when he's telling me a fib. So I waited when I heard him come out of his room. I just stood there, and I just pointed down, and he looked down, and his eyes, just got big as saucers, and he freaked out. He said, "They're coming in the blank house now." I mean, it freaked him out. So I know it wasn't him. There's a footprint, a large footprint on the carpet. So who did that? And he asked me, he said, the doors were locked? And I said, yeah, the doors are locked. So what do you do with that? Really, what I'd love to do is just take sketching encounters on the road. I have a little camper. It's the one I lived in when I parked in the National Forest for 4 months, eastern Tennessee. It was in a place where we were doing a lot of research called Citico Creek National Wilderness Area. So it's that little camper. And I'd love to go into communities. Like I'd love to advertise, like do a town hall somewhere and say, if you've had a sighting, I'd love to talk to you, and I'm going to be here for a couple of weeks or a month, and I'll just work with you. Because, what we may discover is that, God, I mean, how awesome would it be to go to Honobia, Oklahoma, and sit there and have people come, and maybe I could sketch entire families, Josh. Maybe I could sketch grandmothers and grandfathers and young ones, because I did sketch a young one from Honobia that some people saw. Yeah, so I know. So how cool would that be to just, I love to travel anyway. So, one of these days I'd love to just jump in my trunk and my camper and just go to a rural community that has a whole bunch of sightings and just work with people. And then, if they're willing to go on camera, then go on camera and they can tell about their encounter. Then we can show the sketch that they, of the being that they saw. And I don't know, that's just something I'd love to do in the future, is just take it on the road. And do you go out and do physical research?
I thought about it, but logistically, it does. It's one of those things where it kind of becomes like a finding Bigfoot thing, because it's like you go out to these places, and if you let's say you film all day, if there's like nothing going on, that's boring. No one's going to want to watch that, so it's like you have to make it at least entertaining. And I think that's harder to do. It's harder to tell a story of like getting on the road. And like for me, I feel like my niche is getting to do this and tell people their experiences. Yeah, I've definitely thought about it. It's something that'd be cool to do, but it logistically it's tough for sure.
Well, it is. And even like the 4 months that I was camping out there in the wilderness, there was definitely some stuff that happened, but none of it, like, did I really catch on camera? Because it's just, you can't carry a camera around with you 24/7.
Nor do I want to.
Right. But there was definitely some stuff that happened, but on a daily basis, it's not like that. Like you may have something happen 1 week, and then there's 2 weeks go by and nothing happens. Because I would be camping in like one place for a month, and then I would move like a mile away to another campground, further up the mountain, and be there for another month. Sometimes stuff happens, and sometimes there's weeks that go by and nothing happened. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. It's not like doing research, and I still think the best research is going to happen on a habituation site, like where there's some Sasquatch people who have trust in someone, and that's a double-edged sword too, because if you've gained the trust of these people, you don't want to turn a camera on us suddenly.
Yeah.
But that's what the public wants. The public wants you to do that. But once you've developed that sense of trust with them, you throw cameras up, it's done. Like you can take years of building trust up and ruin it in one night by setting a camera up.
I'm not interested in getting photographic evidence. And my whole thing with that is there is never going to be the right photo or video that's going to somehow prove it. You know what I mean? And especially now with AI, everyone is they just have this disposition where, everything is a hoax. Everything is fake. It's either too blurry and shot on something terrible, or it's too clear and then it's suspicious, right? Then it was staged. So it's like, I don't know what you people want. I don't know what you want. And so that's honestly why I like with my channel, I pretty much like hardly if ever try to like cover like video clips. I do sometimes, but like I don't really, because of that reason.
No, I'm with you. And I get asked that, like, are you trying to prove it? Like, absolutely not. I'm not trying to prove anything. I don't care. Like, I honestly do not care who believes what anymore. I don't care. I don't care. I know what I've seen and I know what I've experienced. I saw one briefly on all fours in the middle of, broad daylight, in Kentucky one time. It happened so fast, Josh. I think even if I'd had my camera up, the odds of me even catching it in the camera frame with the speed with which this thing took off, I don't even think. I mean, I might have caught if I'd even turned to get it. But even if I'd had my camera up and the app was, you know what I'm saying? Even then, I don't think I'd have caught what my eyes saw. That's how crazy fast these creatures are. It's unnaturally fast. It's not, of course, they can move real slow too, but most people, when you see something that you're not prepared for, the last thing you're thinking about is your camera. You're just not. You're thinking, your brain is squirming with, what did I just see? You're trying to wrap your mind around, what was that?
Yeah, I hear that a lot from people where they're like, I just, that wasn't a thought, because everyone in the comments is like, you didn't think once to pull your phone? Like, come
No.
on. But I get it. I mean, I playing the devil's advocate, I understand. But it's like, I also very much so understand the position of the person who went through it. It's like, you just,
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of people out there who've never been shocked by something, just suddenly appearing. I think there's a lot of people that have never I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people who've never had paranormal experiences. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a magnet, but they just happened around me all my life. So it's normal for me.
and why they choose certain people to do certain things and reveal themselves in a certain way. That's for all things supernatural. I don't know. That I do not know. I have a theory that it has to do with your bloodline. Again, I don't know for sure.
Now, my children, I have two boys and a girl, and they don't really experience like a lot of weird stuff.
That's a good thing.
It's
a good thing.
Good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was definitely something I was seriously concerned with. I mean, they obviously have been checked on. Apparently, it's all good for now, or maybe it stopped, and I'm hoping it has all of that stuff.
Beyond what we talked about, what is one of the most profound or unsettling stories you've ever been told, or one that sticks with you to this day?
I would say it's between Matt Emch is probably up there. And I mean, I'm like yourself. I'll never forget the first time I heard his story. I was just,
yeah.
I mean, I had a hard time sleeping that night when I first heard his story. Martin Grove's story. I would so love to do an episode with him. I know everyone should be saying prayers for him. I think he's having some health issues right now. Yeah, but I mean, Martin's encounter, like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, a man lost his life that night, and it would have been them had they not had guns and not been able to get out of there.
If I remember correctly, he was the one that was pulled out of his truck and like devoured, if I'm remembering right.
He was pulled out of his tent, the fireman. But and remember, he had told Martin, just kind of, hey, there's been something kind of circling my tent. Just kind of be aware. And then that was the man that died. Yeah, when they came back because they came back to tell the park rangers what they'd experienced, and then of course, all hell had broken loose there. But then, even the man that Martin had his encounter with was never the same. Like, he never went back to work. I think he had a heart attack or something.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so the man that he had that encounter with never came back to work.
There's an account, and this one always sticks out to me because of how visceral and raw this poor woman. I've listened to over the years a lot of Vic kind of shows, and I unfortunately I don't know the number, but this was years ago, so it wasn't anytime recent, and it was a woman, and I can only vaguely remember, but I remember she was discussing how when she was a child, maybe, not like little, but, a young girl, and this thing tried to get in the window, tried to get in the house, and it was looking at her, and I remember as she's telling this, like, on the show, she's like sobbing. She's even crying. She's sobbing, and she's just getting so worked up that he actually had to like stop her so that they can take a break, because she couldn't handle it. And I remember that was like, in like the top 5, that definitely affected me, because I'm like, you can't stage that. I mean, maybe you could, but no, I don't believe for a second that she was faking that. She was worked up.
Yeah. No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, when you have to take a break, because you can't handle the trauma, like that's.
Yeah. Oh, there's been multiple times I've been working with people, and we just had to stop, and I just tell them, hey, just take your time, you're safe here. It's behind you. You're okay. But man, I often wonder, are we doing enough, for these people? And sometimes I feel really helpless, to do more for them.
This is just me to you. Doesn't that like emotionally affect you? I mean, I know it does, but I'm like, there's times where like I have to, because it's so heavy. I have to like.
I have definitely cried with them. And when I was working on Matt's artwork, there were times I would just have to walk away from it and go do something else because it was so, especially that face that you're talking about, the one where its mouth is open and it's showing its teeth and everything. It's like, screaming. They wrecked me. Like there were times that Josh, I literally just had to go take days off from it. Like I couldn't work on those every day. I had to separate some time with them. And I would have nightmares too. I mean,
I don't like looking at them. Artists. I think you did a beautiful job, but I don't want to see it.
No, I don't go revisit them either. I don't. Not his. Do you think that that's a demonic entity?
I don't know what it was. I come from a Christ-like background, and that's kind of where my faith and beliefs are centered around. But I don't believe that was anything from God. I believe that it was definitely demonic in some way. I feel like if it wanted to kill them, it could have. It could have done it way sooner, considering that the ability. But it's like it enjoyed stalking them. It enjoyed the hunt.
And a lot of them seem to be like that. Like a lot of them seem to be like that. They like maybe they get some energy from that fear.
It made attempts though to like it was going to kill them, when it shot the infrasound up at them, and the fact that it pursued them as long as it had, and if it wasn't for the train, they'd probably be dead. So what was it doing? Why? Fortunately, so many unanswered questions, and I know Matt. I'm sure Matt's told you, but he believes that it was killing the homeless down there and eating them. So we don't know, or maybe it was a biologically engineered thing that had those kind of things. I don't know if you're familiar with Timothy Alberino. Back in 2013, he investigated a situation down in Peru. I want to say it is South America, Peru. I want to say it's Peru. There's this village that's getting attacked by these people in full armor suits. Black. They have visors.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so
yes.
then.
I saw that. Yeah. I saw that episode. They're floating.
Yeah. So okay, so you know all about it. That to me, and he told me about it. And he's like, I believe that it's people who have this technology, but they're very nefarious. What they are, why they're doing it, I don't know. So, but it makes me think. I'm like, well, could it? I don't know. I don't know. It scares me. I will say that. It does frighten me. And there's as there's some days where I kind of have to be like, I got to cover this topic and try to either be really respectful about certain details or like not even there's things I've purposely omitted from things that people have asked me why, and I'm like, well, I feel like there's some things where like I don't feel like I could do it the due diligence and respect, so I'm like, I'd rather just like not cover it. Or there's just things where I'm like, I don't know if I really want to go that route.
Well, there were definitely some entity interested in what I was doing when I was in Kentucky. There was a drone that was the size of the bug, and I know it was a drone. It was. I think I'd only been there like maybe the second or third week after I got to Kentucky, and I was taking a plate of food down to the berm, and I heard this humming, but it wasn't like a bee or a wasp. It was multiplied, and this was 2012. And I looked up above me, and there's this thing hovering, and I noted it's maybe 20 feet above me. And I just keep walking, and it's staying with me. And then I went another 10 yards, and then it just came straight out of the sky and came right to my face, just like stopped right in my face. And I'm looking at it, and it is a black, like shiny black, like like your screen, like when your screen is off, like a glass, black glass, shiny, like a beetle looking thing. Rectangular but thick. I'm trying to think if there's something that just even remotely looks like it, but it's kind of like this shape but smaller. This is a headphone case, but it was like maybe a third of this with wings, and it just came and stopped right in my face. And so I kind of backed up a little bit, and I think it kind of came with me, and I'm like, what the and I just spoke to it, and I said, well, I see you, so whoever's trying to get information, I don't know what you're after, but go the hell away. And so when it went away, stayed with me for a while. And as soon as I dumped the food and I went back up to the house, I immediately called Dennis and I said, "Hey, this just happened." And I described it to him, and he said, "Did you guys ever have this kind of surveillance?" And he said, "Not that I know of." About a year later, I was on my laptop reviewing some. We had put up a thermal camera, 24/7. It just ran 24/7, and I would have to go out there every couple of days and get uh, the card to get the recordings off of it. One time I went out there and it only been up a couple of days, and we had hidden this. Okay, so we had this thermal camera. We hid it in a ice chest. We just cut a little hole for the view thing. Wrapped it up. It was behind a curtain, so it's in an ice chest. It's on a shelf. It's in a doorway. It's behind a curtain, and it's shooting out, little slats. Those old. This was an old trailer home that was on the property that the former owners had used as storage. So we're shooting, across the hallway through this little glass opening, and these windows are 8 feet plus up. And one time I go out there to go get the card, and it's knocked down, like the whole thing's knocked down with the tobacco stick. The tobacco stick's laying there, and the camera and everything's just on the. So I would go get that thermal, and take me days and days to go through it. And there were some really strange anomalies. That's just a whole nother story. But one evening I'm sitting there on my computer, and all of a sudden, see, I used to be a teacher, so sometimes they would add new software to our school computers. So they'd come over the loudspeaker and say, "Hey, we're going to be coming in. We're going to be remotely adding this stuff." So I knew what it looked like when someone would remotely take over your computer.
Yeah.
Well, one evening I'm sitting in Kentucky. This is like a super rural area, and somebody takes over my laptop. Yep. And these files, I can't even do what it was doing. Like, it was bringing up files so fast. Like, if you blink your eye, you're missing how fast these files are up and closing, up and closing, up and closing. I tried to turn the laptop off. It wouldn't turn off. I pull the plug. I did everything to try to get it to stop. It wouldn't stop until it was done doing whatever it was doing.
They're probably looking for files, something.
So they're interested. They're interested, and I was really close friends with Scott Carpenter. He told me some things, and I kept telling Scott, you got to be careful, dude. You got to be real careful with that. Good man. But anyway, and I think my association with that man from the Department of Defense that told me all that stuff. There were definitely times my phone was bugged, back in the day. You could tell the technology was kind of crappy, and it was landline. So you could tell whenever and because he'd be telling me stuff, then all of a sudden you'd hear all this weird clicking, and he'd say, "Well, I gotta go, bye," and he'd just hang up. And he may call me back later and say that we were being recorded. Like, and I kind of learned how to recognize whenever my phone was being tapped into.
Wow.
And there was one time I visited him. He lived about an hour to 45 minutes away from me. There was one time him and I were sitting outside underneath the stars. We had a little campfire going, and something like a light bulb flashed us from up above. Like God pointed a huge. Do you remember those? Well, you're too young, but there were. When I was
the camera flash.
It was like that, yeah. So we were sitting there just talking, yeah, and he's telling me. In fact, it was that evening he first told me about the whole Dogman thing, and we were just sitting there in lawn chairs, just looking up at the stars and talking. And like I said, had a little campfire, beautiful night, and just out of the blue, we got flashed by some. What the hell? Just a bright white flash, like it lit up the whole place, and then just went dark again. I just looked at him. I sat up in my chair, and he sat up, and and I said, "Well, what was that?" And he says, "Well," he didn't know exactly what it was, but he said we probably should leave. And then so I left, and I had to. He lived in Bandera, so he lived out in the country, and then I had to take this road, and then I had to go on this main road back to. It's called 173, which is from Bandera to Divine, where I was living. And it's a lonely road. It's 45 minutes of there's nothing but Texas hill country, very little houses. But only go kind of sideways, the very outsides of a place called Hondo, Texas. The rest is just country. And so I remember when I hit the main road and I made a left-hand turn and I'm starting out of Bandera, not 200 yards behind me, there's a car, pulls out and follows me all the way back to my home. And I was scared to like go home. So I kind of just, kind of rode around the neighborhood, and I went into a all night gas station just to see if that car would stay with me. When it did come by, because I stopped at this place, and it's there's a four-way stop. There's a light there. And so I just stood there with the cashier. The cashier was like someone I went to high school with. So I'm just standing there talking. And it was a black, stupid, like old black sedan looking car that was following me. Yeah. See, so I knew they were watching what we were doing.
I'm not sure if you're aware of who Nathaniel Gillis is. He's a researcher, author. I know he's dealt with demonology and stuff before, but he was just telling me that he has to be really careful about what he releases, how often he releases it. He shared with me some things too that I'm like, dude, you got to be careful what you do. You have to be really intentional about your format as well. And I think one thing, well, first off, no one's protected. When you cover this topic, no one's protected, but probably my saving grace is probably my format seems more entertainment. And so I hate to say it. I hate to say that it probably to the general public looks more like fictitious than it does anything else. But at the same time, it probably saves my butt, because if I was like releasing like genuine, like deep research, I probably wouldn't be alive. I don't know.
I know it's definitely something to, yeah, it's something to consider. I mean, and we have to, like, I pray for protection every night, like I do. And I pray for the protection of eyewitnesses as well. And I was constantly praying for Matt, and I still do. And he, we all pray for each other. The one I'm working with now that had the alien abduction when she was 7 or 8 years old, she prays for me. I pray for her. Hers is a crazy story. But, I've been like physically attacked before by something that was unseen that tried to drag me down. I literally tried to drag me to the floor. And that happened about 2 years ago here in this house. I mean, right at that door back there.
Wow.
It's the scariest thing that I've ever experienced physically. I know. And we've just been so lied to, and we're still being lied to about, I think we're being lied to about the Sasquatch people and what I don't know what their role is here. And, they're so varied. Some people have really peaceful interactions with them, they're trying, like some people have been healed physically by them. Yeah. And then you've got others, and I know they've killed people. I have no doubt that there's some of them out there that have killed people. I was going to say, I'd love to hear one of those stories. I've never heard a story. I've not heard one where the dogman saved somebody, but I would love to hear that. Have you done one on your channel?
There was one in particular. Well, there's actually two. There's one in particular where I'm going to assume that they did this telling the truth, and that the long story short is that they were very close with this dog growing up. The dog passed, and that as they got older, they went out with their family, something happened, and they got into a situation where their camper was like over a cliff, and like these dogmen appeared, and this one big one, what the man considers the alpha, like walked over to the window and looked right at him. And he basically described it as like, that's the same look the dog gave me, like, not like but like there's just this, like, when you look into someone's eyes, sometimes you just, you have this like mental understanding where it's like, oh, like there's a recognition there. It didn't make an expression or anything, but he just said that we had this connection, and then all of them moved away, and then all of a sudden their thing was pulled back or somehow moved back. And then at the end, it went back over to the driver's window, and of course his family's like freaking out because they're like, what the heck are these things? And he rolled down the window, and it was basically letting him like touch it and like touch its head and stuff like that, where his dog liked to be touched. But then I guess the other ones were like looking back at it, kind of like, what are you doing? Let's get out of here. And I guess I could look back at him one final time, and like that they bailed. And so again, like I try to take that stuff with a grain of salt, but at the same time I'm like, and actually Matt is the one that shared that with me. He knows more about that than I do, that there was a lot of stuff going on pre-flood that we just don't know about, and somehow it's all connected. How, I don't know. I really don't know.
And I love Timothy Abarino. I love him.
Oh,
I love him.
awesome.
I love his work. Absolutely. No, we cannot ignore, we absolutely cannot ignore what's going on. Like there's so many, Jim and I just interviewed Cliff Barrickman and Maria.
Oh, that's cool. Right on.
Mayor. Yeah. And Russell Akord. But, Cliff and Mariah are just so on the scientific thing. You can't have that you can't have those conversations with it. Russ seemed to be a lot more open-minded.
I understand that. I get it.
Mariah's experienced a couple of things that, it's made kind of rocked her world, which is that needs to happen. It's like you and I are given pieces of puzzles. With every witness we interview, with every report that we take, there's pieces of the puzzle, and we're trying to build this. We're trying to figure out where these fit, and we're trying to build this picture. And sometimes there's like pieces of the puzzle and we just don't know where they go yet, And
Right.
science obviously has not figured it out, and I don't think they're going to figure it out yet. I mean, science is seriously in some kind of strange, steel box that they can't seem to get out of. But, just because there's these pieces that we don't know where they fit on the table yet, science just wants to toss them. Well, if it's not this, then they don't have any value. And I feel exactly the opposite. I feel like a lot of the understanding is going to come from those pieces that we don't know where they fit on the table yet, but we have to keep them. Okay, so maybe these pieces are not over here in this corner. We don't know where they're going to fit yet, but we can't ignore those pieces just because we don't know what they mean yet. I think the answers are going to come from that pile, and I think this pile is like the hidden stuff where those that are the powers that be keep us away from that kind of knowledge. But I think you and I and those people who are open-minded are on the edge of discovery. We just got to keep listening, because eventually, maybe science will catch up. I don't know, but I kind of doubt it. Yeah. Well, if you ever have witnesses that would like sketches done, and you don't have time for them or
Oh,
whatever,
100%.
or
Yeah, I'm going to send towards you.
or here's another thing: if you ever have, like, say you have a witness and if you'd like, I'd make sketches for you, and then you could put them on your show.
I mean, that would be, yeah, that would be incredible.
Is there something that Sybilla and I could do that would support people like yourself who have PTSD, and it might be something that you might be able to help us come up with something that would help witnesses? I don't know what that is.
Giving them a platform to tell it on, I feel like it is a good one. One that isn't like these woods are haunted, where it's just completely fabricated for entertainment, but actually, like, they're raw, honest,
Yes,
where it's like, hey,
yes.
this is what happened, I feel like that's really important. So if any of the eyewitnesses you have, if you ever wanting to send them my way, I'd be more than happy to have given this pedestal. It's opinion. The more people that see it, you're always going to have haters, but you never know. And I told this to everybody. I'm like, you never know the one person who happens to click on it and they see it, and they don't comment, but they're like, oh my gosh, they feel they resonates with them. They're like, I'm not alone. And they also happen to reach out, and that gets them brave enough to at least be like, hey, I saw this. I had so many of those kind of people after Matt's thing, and just, throughout, they're like, hey, I've been watching your videos. Well, come to find out back in so-and-so, I'm like, wow. So it's like, it's a movement. It's literally a movement at this point.
That's good. And how many thousands upon thousands of people are out there that still have not told their story to anyone?
How many?
I really think there's hundreds of thousands of people. When I was I'll make it brief. When I was working in the Sasquatch Museum, Josh, the number of people that would walk in there that would, they kind of check you out. They're like, well, you don't believe this Sasquatch thing, do you? And I'm like, yeah, I do. I've seen them. And they're like, okay, well, let me tell you what happened to me, because they'll feel comfortable then telling you. And I can't tell you how many times a week someone would come in and say, you're the first person I've ever told that to. There's just thousands upon thousands of people that have had experiences that, like, literally, they're never going to see the light of day unless they, figure there's some safe place to do it. Thousands and thousands and thousands. The ability to take an encounter that someone has had and, do it justice by creating a beautiful video of them telling their story, and buying, I think, my software. I have DaVinci. I use DaVinci.
Yeah, I do too.
I mean, what is it, $275 for DaVinci, and the crap that you can do with it is amazing.
It's incredible. Yeah.
So, like, I mean, we live in such a great time that someone who's never made a movie in her life can create a movie, and go to Epic Sound and get the beautiful soundtracks and sound effects and all sorts of cool stuff, and make a movie and have people actually watch it, and How cool is that? I mean, just it's such a great thing. I mean, we live in a great time that just you people like you and I can make movies
Yeah,
and
or just
impact
basically
people's. Yeah,
be artists.
yeah,
Video
yeah.
artists and like sound design and music and all that stuff. It's like, man, you could do so much stuff. I remember back in the early days when I was trying to do sound effects, I would take like cardboard boxes and I would like hold up the mic and like make all these like beating sounds, and then I would like put them in like my DAW, and I would like make them like really reverb and really like. And so, like, you have, like, you go back to some of the other ones, and you'll hear, like, and it tried to get in the door, and, like, the background, like, as I call their impacts, it's like,
Foley. They're
thank
Foley.
you, Foley. Yeah, I've always
Foley
thought that was
artists.
cool. Yeah, and so like I would like do a really like amateur makeshift one. I've done it so many times. Or like for parts, I'll do the voice and I'll like change the voice and stuff like that. And so just you just have fun with it. You know what I mean? You become a jack of all trades. You just have a good time.
Yeah. I mean, really, we're blessed. We're blessed to be in this time and to be able to upload a video to YouTube and the opportunity for thousands of people to watch it. I mean, we're really blessed. We really is. I know there's this guy that I watch. He's a weather guy, Max Velocity. His name is Max Velocity. That's his channel. He's got over 1 million subscribers. And he's literally like, he just graduated from college with a meteorology degree. But he is making so much money on YouTube because when he goes live, like when there's extreme weather, there's tornadoes anywhere, he goes live, there'll be 200,000 people watching him live. And he has people on the ground who are tornado watchers that are live streaming into his live cast. So he's up here in the corner, he's got live radar, and he's going all over the country, up and down where these dramatic storms. He's calling tornadoes before the National Weather Service is calling him. So he's warning people way in advance of these storms. And I'm telling hundreds of thousands of people are watching him live. I mean, this kid he's probably already a millionaire. Just following YouTube.
Crazy.
It's so great. Someone asked him in one of the chats last week, they said, well, are you going to go get a job as a meteorologist? He was like, there's no way.
Yeah, why would I? Yeah.
Why would I? Yeah, he'd be stuck in a. Yeah, he said, I can live upcast anytime there's bad storms coming, anytime. And he'll be on the air like 24 hours sometimes, following weather. Like he'll stay with the storm until it's done, warning people. Well, thank you. Thank you for reaching out. Like I said, I never feel like I'm that interesting. So people say, would you come on my show? I'm like, why would you want to talk to me? I'm not that
disagree. I disagree. This was so much fun.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I super appreciate it. And I hope we can do some stuff together. I'd really love to do that, especially if there's some kind of advocacy that we can do for these people. Just people can find me at Sketching Encounters. They can see the artwork that is created with the artwork, with the artist. I'm sorry. So there's Sketching Encounters where you can see the artwork that's created with the witness. And then I have a website called just SybillaIrwin.com. And if they want to see the witness sketches that I've done in the past, they just click on the gallery that says witness sketches. And there's a whole bunch of them. There's a slideshow up at the top, and and you click on any of those things in the slideshow, and it opens up to see the big images. So